On the podcast, we interviewed Courtney Jacobs. Courtney is a functional nutritionist, nutritional therapy practitioner, and certified life coach with over 18 years of experience in the health and wellness field. As the founder of Final Key Wellness, Courtney combines her expertise in functional nutrition with life coaching, neural retraining, and mindset work to create personalized protocols that help clients overcome obstacles and achieve lasting transformation. She takes a holistic approach, addressing not only the physical symptoms, but also the emotional and mental blocks that can hinder true wellness. By empowering clients to shift their mindset and adopt healthier habits, Courtney helps them get unstuck and make meaningful, sustainable changes that improve their overall quality of life. Hold up, one more thing. If you have not yet scheduled your 45-minute free exploration call to find out what the root cause of your symptoms are and your next steps to getting symptom free, you are going to want to pause this podcast and go do that right now. So I invite you to go to nutritionwithconfidence.com, book your free exploration call, and find out how to get your results.
Welcome to the podcast. I think a place I'd like to start is to hear a bit about your journey, your health and wellness journey. How did you get into the health and wellness space? I know a part of your journey has been nutrition. A big part's been limbic work. Wh- could you tell your story in a nutshell?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the amazing part that everybody needs to hear is it almost feels so long ago. It's like, what happened? So you can actually get to a place where you've been recovered so long, you're like, whoa, that feels like a different lifetime ago. But at the time, it was extremely scary, right? So I went through what I call a perfect storm. Or my perfect storm. And I see a lot of clients experience that. They're okay, 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 and then not okay, really not okay. And at that time, I was going through a divorce. I was overtraining, exercising for a marathon, and training in other ways. And I moved into a home with mold. I now know that I have a SIRS uh, gene so that I don't process mycotoxins the same. At the time, I did not know that, nor did I know I was living in mold. I just started getting really weird symptoms. Like I could run 8 miles one day and kill it. And the next day, I could barely walk up the stairs. And I thought, this is so weird. This is so weird. And I started noticing, I was like, oh, I have an issue with dairy. That's my problem. And then it was like, oh, I have an issue with gluten. And then I started reading all this stuff. Oh, and then over time, it was like, oh, now I have a problem with cauliflower. And now I have a problem with, and my belly started distending really huge. And I started bruising all over my body. But this was slow over 2 years. And I went to the doctor and I was an athlete. So I looked very healthy. And she said, looks great. See you next year. And I was like, hey, by the way, I don't feel right. Like something's definitely happening. And at the time, I didn't associate this with it, but I was going through bits of anxiety and different emotional swings. My cycle started getting worse. Then I started getting joint pain, but I associated that with different foods because now I figured out oxalates were affecting my joints because now I started learning stuff. And uh, I went to the gastroenterologist, and oh, thank God. I figured out, I saw this picture of this girl online and she was an athlete and she had a huge swollen belly, like pregnant. And she said, oh, I have this thing called SIBO. And I was like, oh, this is what I have. I have a leaky gut. And so, but this was a lot of years ago. And I went to the gastroenterologist and I said, I think I have a leaky gut and SIBO. And he said, that's not a thing. And there's no such thing as a leaky gut. And I said, I'm reacting to every food. He said, everybody has gas and bloating. And I was like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I can't eat food. I can't eat food. Last year, I couldn't there were six foods I couldn't eat. Now I can only eat six foods. Like something is seriously wrong. So I flew because I had been learning a lot about the natural health world. Allison Seebecker had a SIBO center in Portland. And so I flew myself to the SIBO center. I was like, I'm just going to pay for the best. And I figured out that my health insurance was not going to help me and I was going to have to pay out of pocket. And I went, and it was the first time they said, yes, all of this stuff. Um, I would say over the process of 2 to 3 years, almost every system in my body started to break down. I don't think there was anything that was functioning right, from my nervous system to my my gastro system, my mental health, my hormonal cycle. Yeah, it was really scary. Anyway, so I started my journey there and I thought, oh, this is the answer. I found the people and they are gonna fix me. And they moved the needle, but they didn't fix me. And then I went on a search. So I was sick for 8 years. I worked with a lot of different practitioners. And something that I want to tell people who are on a healing journey, this is often what happens. They go through years of meeting different practitioners, and maybe they work with somebody for a year and a half, and then at the end of their journey, they take a supplement or meet a person, and it gets them the rest of the way, and they say, that's the thing, that's the solution, that's what healed me. But that's actually not the case. It's all of the different practitioners, although the SIBO Center and Seebecker's people couldn't get me all the way, that moved my needle, as did most of the other people who I worked with. Now, some of the people I got worse. Some of the protocols didn't work at all. So that was scary. But I would say I got better and then like went back, got better, went back. And then I got to a place where I was about 60% healed. And I actually thought I was in remission. Um, because I went through functional nutrition school. And what I say is like, I had histamine issues and salicylate issues and oxalate issues and lectin issues. And if I froze my food and if I did this thing and if I jumped on one foot and if I like everything was perfect, I wouldn't have a symptom. But I couldn't tolerate a supplement. And I still had a ton of food intolerances, but I could work. I was training again. I just thought, wow, man, I have arrived. And I had a story that you get better when you have chronic illness, but like I just figured my system would never be robust again. I felt fragile still. And so then I started to get symptoms of light sensitivity, more intense than I had ever had, sound sensitivity. The joint pain started coming back. I started reacting to EMF. I started to not be able to wear my earrings because my whole system started to get sensitive. And then when I started to react to EMF in my apartment, I started to get really scared because I was like, I'm reacting to the world now. Like I have a full real problem. And I had moved from California to the East Coast. And for 3 years in a row, all three of those winters, I experienced seasonal depression. And depression, like I would pray to God that I didn't want to wake up in the morning. I tanked. And so my body was doing okay. I had this sort of sensitivity. I didn't really know what was going on, but I was actually thriving. I was like coming out of the summer, thriving, going into the fall. And all I thought is, there's got to be something I can do so that I don't tank with seasonal depression. And so I started looking and I found this holistic psychiatrist in Massachusetts. And I went to her and I filled out her paperwork, and she got like a book of paperwork like this, right? And she was like, I was in limbic system impairment. I was obsessed with every symptom. I just thought I was like really smart and had researched all this stuff. She probably read it and was like, "Whoa, this woman's extremely dysregulated." But I was just like, I'm being very thorough. I have all of these problems, and she said to me, you have limbic hypersensitivity, I think. And I had never heard of that. And I did have somebody tell me in the very, very beginning of my journey, they said, hey, there's this hour practice I think you could do every day. I think it would make you feel better, but they didn't really explain it. And I was like, yeah, so I'm not doing that. And I'm going to find the doctor because there's like a solution to this, right? And so 8 years later, I was like, all right, I'm willing to try. Because I reacted to every supplement and violently, like really, really extreme reactions to supplements. I was like, this can't even hurt me, right? So I started it. And the only reason why I started it was in hopes that maybe I wouldn't get seasonal depression. Um, when I jumped into limbic work, I can remember telling my mom and my best friend, I said, this sounds totally woo-woo. Like, this is crazy, but I'm like, it's like 2 grand and I have nothing to lose. Like, I'm not going to get worse. Like, there's no way this could hurt me, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so
Yeah.
I literally just threw myself into it. I signed up for a program. I went through multiple different programs. I got a one-on-one coach. I joined limbic groups. I created limbic friends. I had no idea that this thing that I started just to not have seasonal depression would get my body the rest of the way to remission. And so what I now know is that I was doing the perfect diet and I couldn't take the right supplements. My body wasn't actually healing because my brain was stuck in a state of fight or flight, constantly releasing cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. In that state, the tight junctions of the gut can't heal. The microbiome can't be robust like it should be. It's in an inflammatory state. And so all of my incessant researching, all of my neurotic behavior, which I thought was actually supporting me, was making me sicker. And just by getting my body out of fight or flight, it was a couple months later, I was able to start taking the first supplement. And when I tell you that by me doing limbic work, my entire life is better. Meaning who I am, like everything about me, the constitution of Courtney is different. It's the single-handed best thing that ever happened to me in my life. My whole life, I would get overwhelmed by things. The world felt like a lot. I thought I was an HSP, a highly sensitive person. I thought I was an empath. I read up a lot about both of those things, and I now know the more I read about it, the more I built neural networks to make the negative symptoms of that worse. And yeah, basically, and when I say remission, I think this is really important for everybody to hear when they hear other people talk about remission. My body's at about 90-95%. What
You're
that
freaking
means,
amazing. You're freaking amazing. You ran like what is it? Was it like 45 miles, like over a marathon in the Grand Canyon earlier this year? I don't know.
yeah, so I
Tell
ran the marathon. I ran the marathon in Miami, and then I just hiked the Grand Canyon, rim to rim to rim to rim, 42
Yeah.
miles in 36 hours. And so my body is strong. I also, if I'm under a lot of stress, I might experience a histamine symptom or like I'm human. Like things happen, but I'm not scared of my body anymore, and I don't feel fragile. And I have more supplements than I should in my cupboard because um now I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try this thing or I'm gonna try this thing just to see what they do to my body. I can wear earrings and I have a light in front of me. I have my whole life back, and that is specifically from limbic work. So limbic work was my thing that got me over the edge, right? And I would say 70% of my clients or more that come to me with complex chronic illness or any kind of issue have limbic system impairment. It's a piece of their puzzle, right? So all of those other things took me where I needed to go. And then it's not that limbic work was the, oh, holy grail, the thing that's going to fix everybody if you don't do anything else. It's not that. That was just the last piece that I needed in my puzzle to get my body there. And so I find most people need this as a piece of their puzzle to continue their journey forward.
Yeah, I'm
Mm.
so struck with what you're talking about, Courtney, because it's such a process. And I know that has been true for me. Is there, a part of me wants there to be the magic bullet, right? Whether it be limbic work, whether it be a specific eating protocol or other lifestyle change. And the truth is, it's not. It's I think for all of us, our bodies, minds have experienced so much stress in our younger years, and then continue to experience a myriad of stresses in the modern context. But I'm so drawn to this pursuit that you engage in of different practitioner after different practitioner that just helped that much more. That brought you to this next place of healing, and that let me know if I was tracking right. I'm hearing a part of you that was so focused on healing was in some ways problematic because you were in that aroused fight or flight state, and it was then the limbic work that you were able to your your mind, but then also body was able to calm and really heal. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. So I'll explain to you in two different ways what was happening. I actually think all the incessant researching and the hypervigilance about the food and supplements or chemicals, it actually made me worse. Over time, it continued to make me worse, and I actually think I created some of the conditions. Now, here's two ways in which that happens. Let's take somebody with multiple chemical sensitivity. They do brain scans of somebody who has multiple chemical sensitivity. So there are some people who are so severe, if they were to walk into the front door of Target, because the detergent is on the other side of the store, they will have convulsions. The body will literally convulse. They can't walk down the street because if a dryer vent is shooting out the like softener, they will have a reaction. How does that happen to somebody? So they do brain scans of the people with multiple chemical sensitivity, and what they see is the part of the brain that's associated with smell starts to overdevelop. So what happens is you find out, oh, I'm reacting to these chemicals. And then you start researching. And you think, oh my gosh, this stuff is toxic. This is going to kill me. And you start going into a home and you're like, they have a plug-in, there's a candle, here's a thing. And you start freaking out and you start getting scared. And then you start becoming hypervigilant. And then all of that hypervigilance builds neural networks and overdevelops parts of the brain. So you start reacting to inert substances, right? So that was an extreme example, but some of us might have chemical sensitivity just from a candle in a room. And that the fear that we have is exacerbating that condition, right? So that's one way. Another way is I would sit in bed at night and I would just like scroll and research and research and research. Um, Seeing what could happen from a supplement, I thought was like, cool, this is fun. This is like, I'm like so into this. Um, Causes these mini traumas, this mini stress. Because although I thought I was fine, the brain is freaking out because I've had severe symptoms from stuff. And then it starts putting that into the brain. So my brain is releasing more stress chemicals, which is causing more inflammation, not allowing my gut to heal. So I just researched for 2 hours, not knowing I was just creating a cascade of inflammatory response so that my body couldn't even heal. And now I know all of this information, which I get to walk around and scare myself with. So in the very beginning of my limbic work, they told me you cannot research anything. And I thought, um, yeah, okay. When that happened, And I was willing to do anything. Because I did not want to get depressed and want to die again. When that happened and I stopped researching, and then they said, well, you can't not just research, you can't think about it. And what I realized in that first day is my entire day had been thinking about my health. I had been symptom scanning. I was looking, am I bloated? Do I have histamine symptoms? Does this joint hurt? How's my fatigue? Like, what is going on? And the first month, cried so many times because I was pattern interrupting my brain constantly because all my brain knew what to do is to think about my health. And it was shocking to realize that it was all day, every day. And so I stopped researching and I worked on starting to pattern interrupt. And yeah, so that's part of the beginning of the journey.
What do you do to pattern interrupt, or what were the big things that helped you in that initial part of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times, so I called my limbic system Limby, and I would say, no, 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 Limby, we're not doing this today. Not doing this today. Anyway, Limby. No, or I would just start thinking about something else. I also had a couple mantras. I would say, I'm happy and I'm healthy, I'm happy and I'm healthy. And I can remember eating nuts one day, and then this knuckle, which I still have a lovely thing from oxalates, my knuckle started hurting and I was driving. And my brain started to say, you ate those oxalates, you shouldn't have had that. And now you're going to do this and you're going to end up with an autoimmune disease and you're going to die early. And we don't have family. And what are we going to do? And I was like, I'm happy and I'm healthy. I'm happy and I'm healthy. And it's like, you shouldn't have ate those nuts. You knew you shouldn't have eaten those nuts. Now you're going to get whatever. And like, you do this to yourself. And I was like, I'm happy and I'm healthy. I'm happy and I'm healthy. And I was driving. And I said, I'm happy and I'm healthy for a 20-minute drive while my brain just kept going. And when I pulled into my driveway, I just like cried because I was like, it's never going to stop. It feels like Rocky Balboa. Like it was just like so much. But then I got in the house, I started doing whatever. And then I remember another day I was in the car and I started symptom scanning about something. And I was like, I'm happy and I'm healthy. I'm happy and I'm healthy. And then like a couple minutes later, I just heard the music and I was like, oh, it worked. Okay. And then it was like, then it tried to scare me again. But so part of it is literally pattern interrupting in the moment. Some of it would be me calling a friend. Some of it would me be distracting with a movie. But my brain was stuck in a state of fight or flight. So I would started doing limbic practices. So it's an hour a day. That over time helped my brain not be so insensitive. Incessant? What's the word? Yeah. Like nonstop. So that helped me calm it. But in the moment, I would also picture like a tennis ball coming in and I would hit it and I would be like, I would like picture the thought just like shooting out. Or I would be like, oh, okay, whatever. And I just made it so silly. I stopped talking about my health conditions, period. I stopped looking at it. So I had a lot of bloating. I had a lot of rashes. I had a lot of red in my cheeks. And for months, I wore this big hoodie because I didn't want to see my belly because I used to see it and have everybody touch it and look at it. And my cheeks would get hot. So I would feel them. I literally ignored every symptom. Now, if somebody is experiencing big symptoms, I want you to seek a medical professional or go to the ER. Because there's some people that hear this and they're like, they said to ignore everything I felt. So I'm not saying ignore everything you feel. Little
Yeah.
minor symptoms, we have to take our limbic system off of it. Our limbic system is like a spotlight. And so whatever we put it on will grow, just like the multiple chemical sensitivity. So I had to take my spotlight off of that. And then I got to start thinking about the things that I love, spirituality and friends and connection and my sports. And it was almost like, what do I do with all this free time now that I'm not obsessed with my health?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so different from conventional medicine, which is so problem focused. And even in functional medicine, we go to all the integrative doctors, naturopathic doctors. It's still so focused on what's wrong and the testing, and let's just figure out what's wrong. And that really grows this part of our brain that's like really good at let's find out what's wrong here. But
Yeah.
then we lose this capability, and what's really powerful about our brain is the neuroplasticity and being able to create solutions. And that's what we want to focus more on. It sounds like the limbic work does that. Can you tell us more about the science of limbic work in a way, about what neuroplasticity is? Why is this even possible for our brain? What is the limbic system even?
Yeah.
Like
That's
5 questions.
great. That's a great question. So let me first go with what is our limbic system. So our
Mhm.
brain stem is our fight or flight. This frontal lobe is our neocortex. This is what gives us rational thinking. So if you picture this is your brainstem, this is our neocortex. When we have had a stressful childhood, when we've experienced trauma, so chronic illness in and of itself can be the trauma to flip this. Also, being exposed to mold, some viruses will flip this on its own, right? And many people who have chronic illness have had stressful childhoods. So this neocortex is offline.
Yeah, and Courtney, I'm
It's,
just gonna pop in for
yeah.
those who aren't watching on YouTube. What Courtney's doing right now, she's putting up a fist and you're pointing to your kind of your knuckles, right? That's the
Mhm.
neocortex.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So this frontal part is our neocortex. It's literally offline. And so the brainstem is running the show. Um, So through limbic work, what you do in the practice for an hour a day is you sit in an elevated state where you're forcing the brain to release dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Those are our feel-good chemicals. They're also anti-inflammatory. They will also help unflip genes for chronic illness that have flipped. But in that hour a day, you're teaching this neocortex to stay down. So if you feel overwhelmed by life and if you are hypersensitive to anything, even things in your environment, teaching this neocortex to stay down gives you more bandwidth and makes you less sensitive. So that's what the limbic system is. Um, one of your questions was the science of neuroplasticity, I think.
Mhm.
So, not long ago, they thought our brain was plastic. What that means is they thought it couldn't change. Once you were an adult and had learned something, they would say old dogs can't learn new tricks. And that was literally the what science believed until they found out about neuroplasticity. So neurons that fire together wire together. So you can absolutely rewire anything about you that you don't like, that isn't working. Our brain is your brain can't not but rewire.
Mhm.
It's an organ that is designed to rewire. I have people ask me, is is there some people that limbic doesn't work for? I said, yeah, lots of people, actually. The ones that don't do it. Those are the only people it can't work for because the brain is meant to rewire. So when we start building new neural networks, we can build new connections of anything we want. So if there's actually anything about your personality that you don't like, that isn't serving you, I used to think all of these things were like Courtney. They weren't Courtney. It was just repeated pattern behavior. And I was able to create exactly what I wanted within myself. So neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to rewire itself. Um,
I love the
yeah.
story you've shared with me, and I think you tell a lot of your limbic um, people that you coach that the story of blue, the color blue for you.
Oh,
Tell
look, and
tell
I
that
even have
story.
blue on. How
Yeah,
funny.
yeah. Please
Okay.
tell that story. It's
Yeah.
about yeah, it's so good.
So this is how our brain is plastic. So Growing up, my mother hates the color blue. And when I mean hates blue, she hates blue. I hate blue couches. I hate when people decorate their house blue. I don't like blue. Blue cars are blue, 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 ugly, right? And so I grew up, I was like, I don't like blue. I just don't like blue. Like, it's not my thing. Like, it's just literally, this is Courtney. I don't like blue. And when I started my limbic work, I really started diving into all of brain health. And I started realizing literally anything about us can be changed. Anything that's not working. If you have fear of this, if you have social anxiety, if you respond in a snappy way, if you, whatever about you that's not working can be changed. And I started doing my practice and I thought, I wonder if I could change this thing about blue. And I kind of did it as a joke. And I started visualizing this bedspread on my bed with blue and purple flowers. And I would picture myself walking in and I'm like, I love this bedspread. So beautiful. The blue flowers. And my brain would be like, I hate blue. But I ignored it, right? And so I did that for about 6 months. And then all of a sudden, I was in a store one day and I passed this blue shirt, and my brain said, oh, look, I love that. And I was like, whoa, I actually like that. And so blue is one of my favorite colors now. And it's my company color. And the reason I chose that for my company color is anything about us that is not working, we can change. You can change. The brain can adapt and change to anything. Yeah.
It just how long does it take then to change? Like, is there any science behind the consistency? Like, how long to be consistent with
Yeah.
this work?
I've heard some science in books say 4 weeks. I haven't really seen that happen in real life anywhere. I was told when I started limbic work, you need to practice this on some level every day for 6 months. And I think they say that to get buy-in. And what happened in my first 6 months is I saw so much tangible proof that I was changing that it gave me buy-in that I did it every day for a year and a half. I would say somewhere between 6 months and 3 years, people need it. You will feel better and different within 6 weeks, right? Now, I've had other people who did it and did it and did it and didn't feel anything for 6 months. And then all of a sudden their brain flipped over. And so we never really know. I've also had many people who in 2 or 3 months they say, oh my gosh, I am like, I've never been this happy and I'm having such a great time. I'm not doing this anymore. And then they come back like 6 months later and they're not well. And what has happened is the brain is starting to function normally or better, right, in 2 to 3 months, but they haven't been doing it long enough to build thick enough neural networks that is fully rewired. So part of the process of repetition is fully rewiring the brain
Mhm.
so that it stays.
Right. Right. That there's, if you think about it, you've got years of wiring in. Maybe if you've been dealing with a chronic illness for 10 plus years, that's 10 plus years of wiring in different behavioral patterns and thought processes around those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Andy, were you going to say something?
I'm just hearing, so I'm hearing there's like one part of this work of maybe a hour-ish practice a day to get into that parasympathetic, relaxed state, and then there's another part of um, noticing maybe these automatic thought processes that are somewhat problematic in our lives and distressing, keeping us in fight or flight. And then as you notice that, you're then rewiring, you're making a shift and doing a mantra of some sort. Am I kind of getting the
Yeah,
gist of this
correct.
process?
So in the beginning, there's an hour practice that you do a day. That stays long term. And then you also learn how to work with your thoughts throughout the day. Because it's kind of like if you go to the gym for an hour, and you eat garbage all day, you're not going to get healthier, right? So you could do an hour of limbic rounds, but if your thoughts are obsessing and repetitive and angry and complaining or scared, it's not going to work. And so there's many different things we learn as tools to do throughout the day. Then once the brain, so that's top down limbic work. So I've been through about 5 of the different limbic programs. I've read a ton of the books, and some of the programs do top-down limbic work. That is getting the brain out of fight or flight. Some of the programs do body up, all somatic. They work on the vagus nerve, they work on getting the body out of fight or flight. We combine both of the practices. So after we get somebody's brain out of fight or flight, we start working on the somatic stuff because the body or the person has either been through trauma in their past or the experience of chronic illness is traumatic, right? They've had scary symptoms happen, and we have something called cell danger response that can be stuck inside of our cells. And so we start working with the vagus nerve and doing somatic practices, teaching the body to get out of fight or flight. And so those come along later in the journey to start teaching the body how to do that. And then, yeah, then later we start working towards a purpose and then dealing with past trauma if somebody wants to go there. And we work on evolving as a human. And so when you do nutritional therapy alongside limbic work, your whole being changes. Like you're not just getting your body to recovery, you are going to end up whole, well, happy, strong, robust. Yeah, that's what happens with limbic work.
And speaking of some of those, the nutritional piece, will you talk about some of the protocols, nutritional protocols that you see as helpful to do in conjunction? I mean, there's so many diets out there, right? There's everything from vegan to strict carnivore. What are some of those approaches that you see as really helpful in conjunction with the limbic work?
Yeah, great question. I will tell anybody listening my number one piece of advice, which I have really been on a thing about. If you are working with a practitioner or anybody, or you're hearing something online and they are extremely dogmatic, this is the way you recover. This protocol, this thing, you need to be carnivore. You need to do this. You have to remove oxalates. You have to eat all the sugar and starch. You have to whatever. If their idea is this is the way out and they're extremely dogmatic about it, I would run. I
So
would
agree.
run so far. So I don't know whether they are, I think they mean well. I think what happens is you learn something and then you sort of get brainwashed in that. But there are many of us who practice, like Natalie and myself. So we're peers and friends, and we bounce ideas off and help each other. I think we're both very open-minded practitioners. And what I know from working with people with complex chronic illness is there's not one way out, that everybody's body is so bio-individual and that they really need to find a practitioner who can help them find the right diet for their body. I feel like if I were to say, oh, this thing is great, I'm really doing a disservice because then somebody hears it and they apply it. Like when I was sick and I would be like, bone broth is the answer. And I like take it and I end up in a flare and can't get out of bed for 2 days. And I'm like, but it's healing everybody else. It's so healthy. And I just like kept trying to do this thing that didn't work for my body. Um, but there are simple things, right? Like toxins aren't good for anybody, right? So there's like simple things that are the basic. Um, I would say when I first started practicing, I practiced with more diets than I do right now. And oftentimes when people come to me, because I know the journey can be long and hard, um, if they're mentally ready, we go for like, the right diet on steroids, I call it. Like, we're gonna go big to fix this now. Like, because before I would think, well, let's just try a little of this. I don't want to wear you out. And are you ready for this? And now I'm like, hey, if you want to move the needle, like, here's the way to go. And yeah. So I like to
I love
actually
that.
take bigger steps with the diet now, because I feel like getting people results and helping them feel a bit better gets buy-in so that they can make it through the long haul. And so, yeah.
Hmm. I love this. I want to go more into diet with you a little bit too, but before that, kind of the merging of I've heard other limbic coaches say to not do any dietary changes while doing the limbic work. So what are your thoughts on that? And because you obviously do both, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's a really great thing because I was in limbic groups, right?
Yeah.
And in different limbic programs, and they said, you can eat anything. I'm just eating cake. And like from like the grocery store. And I was like, okay, okay. It doesn't mean that you can't at some day. What has to happen is the food fear has to get removed, right? So because I had reacted to so many things, I had such fear around food and I had been given so many different protocols that I was just really scared. And I felt like, oh, I fail if I ate like a tomato because it had lectins. Or the first thing we work on is removing any food fear,
Mhm.
right? Um, and then just by removing food fear, I noticed that we're able to help move the needle. I'm going to be honest, it depends how far somebody is. So if somebody has like one inkling little symptom and they have like some anxiety and they end up at a limbic program and their gut's not a total mess, possibly by getting them out of fight or flight, they're going to be okay, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
If the body's been through a lot, I can't fathom that it can happen without the right tools. So limbic work, it doesn't fix the body. What it does is our human body has an innate healing capacity. It can heal on its own. So it puts us in that state. But some of us need to be on the right diet and giving our body the right tools to put all the building blocks back together. And so that's what the diet's going to do. So if you don't have the limbic work, your body is not in a place where it can actually build and repair the way it's supposed to. And then the diet, if you're not doing that, you're not having that, or you might still be taking in inflammatory foods and or taking in a food that's just not right for your body and your condition that seems quote unquote healthy. So I can't imagine somebody that has a lot of stuff can do it with only one. I think that's the problem in general is when somebody works with a practitioner, they go to somebody and they're just detoxing heavy metals, or they're just working on their mold, or they have this great nutritionist, or now they have a limbic coach, or this person helped me with my circadian, my quantum health, but nobody's looking at all of it. And because I knew I needed all of the pieces, that's how we practice. I step back and look at the whole puzzle so that we can see all of it because all of the things matter, detoxing and everything. But we can take it without a scary, hypervigilant approach. We can move slow so that it feels good for the nervous system. I've
Mhm.
had a couple different people make it to remission. Well, no, I've had many people make it to remission, but a couple different people who use limbic work, and then I'm going to explain what they did. They started like being around other limbic people and they were like, oh, I can eat whatever now. This is amazing. My body's recovered. I made it my 2 years. And then they started to get it, started eating a lot more sugar and just from like stuff. And then they're like, oh, I'm getting night sweats again. And I'm having some PMS or and I'm like, yeah, so when we start to have blood sugar dysregulation, we, start to get it imbalances our sex hormones, and they're like, oh, so the food, it does impact us, even if I am doing all the limbic stuff. I'm like, yeah. And so typically what I see a lot is when people make it to recovery, then they kind of go play with food and they're like, oh, look, I can have all these foods that I can't have. And then they're like, oh, actually, I probably feel better, like more over in this corner. And then
Right.
they naturally move back to a healthy diet for their body. Um, that's what I find sort of happens in the process.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and what you're talking about here is one of our main focuses of this podcast is identifying these different practices and variables, contexts that will support both our mind and body in healing amidst, whatever disease process we are contending with. And I'm so drawn to both you and Natalie's practice of uh, drawing from dozens, I think, of nutritional protocols rather than, yeah, I do get concerned with rigid thinking in any field. I completely agree there, and I think I'm curious. Maybe Natalie would want to weigh in here too, as you both have practiced with nutrition. I know avoiding being too dogmatic and having that level of flexibility in your different protocols that you incorporate. But are there some common factors amongst the different nutritional protocols that you two utilize?
Do you have an answer for me?
You first.
Okay. Um, Common factors. You go first.
Okay, I'll jump in. I was like, you first, because this is your interview. So I think a huge common factor is, I mean, I always just think about like simplifying it with the root cause of nutrient deficiencies. So looking at how like the commonality among a lot of the diets that work for people is that they are focusing on more nutrient dense foods, right? So it doesn't the even just cutting out a lot of the processed foods are going to mean that they're going to be focused more of the food that people are eating is more nutrient dense. So they're replenishing the nutrients that our body needs to function and rebuild. And then I do think also stress is a major root cause, right? So whether that stress is impacting our gut microbiome from toxins in our food system. So I think eliminating toxins is kind of a part of that stress piece that is very consistent among a lot of diets. So um, the more therapeutic diets are definitely cutting out toxins from, processed foods, chemicals, pesticides. But also, I mean, with a lot of what you were talking about, Courtney, it's like sometimes it's the plant toxins and the oxalates, lectins, salicylates that are flaring our immune response and impacting like creating a lot of inflammation in our body. So, some people don't have to go so extreme with a diet, I think, but I agree with you, Courtney, that at some point, well, especially since we worked with so many people, we've seen there's these patterns, right, of how it really depends on how ill someone is and how long they've been ill for. And depending on that, you might just want to jump in to the biggest kind of uh, diet change that's going to move the needle for you, because doing little changes might not be enough to get that buy-in, like you were saying, with the limbic system. And with anything we do, we want to see changes as soon as possible, right? So a lot of the protocols that we kind of gear towards are like, let's see that big difference very quickly.
Yeah. So that's a great answer. And so for me, a lot of people come with inflammation, gastrointestinal issues, mental health issues, autoimmune conditions, hormonal conditions. Uh, our modern world has a active onslaught on our microbiome and our gastrointestinal tract. Typically, when people come, that is a big piece of the puzzle. right? So if it's autoimmunity, 80 to 90% of our immune system is located in our gut. If it's a mental health condition, our 80 to 90% of our neurotransmitters are made in our gut. If we have gastrointestinal issues, clearly that's coming from our gut, digestive issues. If we have joint pain or arthritis, that's coming from our gut. So what I know is when people come to me with a bunch of complex issues, inside our gut, we have villi, and they look like a beautiful coral reef. And those who have chronic illness or this host of symptoms, right? They have Lyme or CFS, and these villi are like nubs, right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of practitioners try to go in and just re-inoculate the gut, but these villi aren't. Oh, so when the villi are here, there's things on top called enterobites. Enterobites have hair, and these little hair are the things that house a healthy microbiome. So what I find a lot of practitioners miss is most of these people's villi are like nubs, and then they just go in and they're trying to rebuild the gut microbiome, but they don't even have a house for them. The villi and the enterobites aren't there, so they can't house a healthy microbiome. So I do start with a base where I try to naturally starve off anything that's going on without a lot of kill supplements, because I went through years of those. It was just very aggressive for the body. I work on building the body from the base up. So I want to work on rebuilding the villi, having enterobites there before we even go in and rebuild the microbiome.
Mhm.
I like to start at scratch and build up instead of halfway through the system. So a lot of times people come and they say, I have this symptom and this symptom and this symptom and this symptom and this symptom. And a lot of practitioners play like whack-a-mole. Like we're going after the hormones and we're going after this thing like this. And the diets that I use that I start with, I literally start with the system so that we can rebuild from the ground up. And then all of this pop the weasel slowly starts coming down. And then maybe a couple, 6 months in, a year in, there's still one that's over here like, it won't go away. Then we go address that. But too often people are taking diets and they're most of the time what I see for people who have been to other practitioners is the other practitioner put them on a Band-Aid diet. What that means is a diet that lowered their symptoms. So they're like, oh, you're having these pop the weasels. If you do these things, it'll lower those symptoms. And they do that, but now they're sort of trapped, right? It didn't actually fix the system. What I see, and I don't mean to generalize, and I mean this in a kind way. A lot of people who have seen a functional medicine doctor or an MD who's sort of on the functional level, they will run a bunch of tests, they will throw a bunch of kill supplements on them, and they will give them a Band-Aid diet. They do not actually rebuild their system from scratch. In a 2-year period of time, you can entirely rebuild your immune system, your microbiome, and your nervous system, but nobody's actually rebuilding that for them. So the base of my diets are I pull out toxins, I pull out plant toxins. Why? Because a plant toxin, whether it's affecting your joint or not, is going to break these villi in the beginning. And I want our best shot at rebuilding you a home so that we can work on addressing that. So
Mhm.
that's how I practice in a general way.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Love.
And I love that. I know we had Dr. Natasha on and talking about uh, regenerating and healing those villi in the gut, and maybe even there's actual leaks in the gut that are causing trouble. And so I'm hearing like supporting someone with a diet that really helps from that base level to allow those villi to heal. And then so I'm curious. I know, the GAPS diet is something that each of you lean on. Will you to just speak a bit about like what are those core foods that are kind of like the staples that allow those villi to heal?
Yeah, so I use, both of us are certified GAPS practitioners. And when I was sick, I went and saw Dr. Natasha speak. And I was like 60, 70 pounds overweight because weight issues have been part of my story. And I was like reacting to everything and I was like inflamed and I like know what I was wearing at the moment. And I felt so trapped in my body. And I stood in line to go see her. And she looked me right in my eyes and she was like, babe, it's not you. It's just your body. You're going to be okay. And I was like, really? And it was like the first person who was like, you're not crazy. And so I had eating disorder issues and I just like I was losing my body and my life and my mental health. And like I was just trying to tell somebody who met me recently. I'm like, I say I was sick, but like somebody who's not been through it can't grasp what it's like to be scared to drink or eat or live and feel like your body is breaking and doctors who you thought could help can't help. And so Dr. Natasha was like, oh, it's just your body. And I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? And yeah, so Dr. Natasha's practices mean a lot to me. I really respect her work. Um, and I also think a lot of people get stuck and trapped on gaps because I do think the diet is too broad to heal most people now. In practice over the last 10 years, what I notice is that people are sicker than it's kind of like every 2 years. I'm like, whoa, this ball game has just gotten more complex. Like people are rapidly getting sicker. And so what it takes to recover now is sometimes more. And so I do like gaps on steroids. I do a bunch of versions of gaps, but on steroids. So we soup it up. And then in the beginning, it's a lot of soft healing foods, a lot of nutrient dense, soft healing foods to heal the gut lining. And if anybody has done gaps and they heard anything and they're like, hey, what Natalie and Courtney say, this is amazing. I'm not doing gaps ever again. It's not the only diet I do. And if you've had a bad experience, which most people have because they tried to do it on their own or they worked with a practitioner, you don't have to do gaps to recover. I don't do gaps with everybody. It's just a piece of tools that we use. Yeah.
It's also such a philosophical shift and reframe that I think goes really hand in hand with limbic system. Like a lot of these core pro methods that we use to heal, I think, have a very similar philosophical approach, which is if you know basically less of an aggressive oppositional approach, right? So like Dr. Natasha told you, it's just your body, we're just gonna, it's not you. There's not like a demonization, right? Like so first and foremost, it's a huge reframe of how you're viewing your body and how you're viewing the symptoms and how you're going to actually work with the body instead of how most of medicine works to either just suppress something in our body or like uptick it, like move. We take medications to like increase our, you know, neurotransmitter production when really like what we should be asking the question, well, why do we not have enough of this neurotransmitter production and work on like that issue? So that I think is a big piece of why the GAPS protocol is so helpful. But just with those microvilli, like that cornerstone food that is a major principle of the GAPS protocol is the meat stock. And it's so different than the bone broth. And it has a lot of the same amino acids as bone broth, but the bone broth is harder for a lot of people with histamines to tolerate. And histamines are a natural process of the healing process as well. So it's part of the healing to move through some of those symptoms and not be afraid of the symptoms or like kind of the side effects of a healing protocol like that. But also there's so many different ways to do the GAPS protocol, so you don't have to, yeah, like suffer through it, right? So but that is a main cornerstone. I think that just hands down is what's different than most other protocols. And yeah.
I think
What were you gonna
something
say?
about, well, the meat stock, I think most people need. Some are adverse or don't want it, and I've seen people move the needle without it. But like for myself, I had to start with an eyedropper. So I had a lot of histamine issues, and I had to start so slow that it was crazy. They were like, I
An
kept because they
eyedropper of meat stock?
Yeah, a meat stock.
Oh.
Yeah. So I mean, I kept trying it on my own or with practitioners, and then they would be like, "Oh, try a cup, try a quarter cup, try a whatever." And then I like try a tablespoon, and I was like, "I react to everything," And then I would finally work with somebody, and she's like, "Hey, try an eyedropper." And I tried the eyedropper, and I got like a little histamine symptom, but she's like, "That's okay. You can use the eyedropper every other day." And I literally built from there. So sometimes you
Mhm.
really need to start from baseline.
Mhm.
Um, but something else that I think is really important that Natalie was talking about is they do aggressive protocols. So like when I went to the SIBO Center, they threw all of these kill supplements at me for 2 to 3 years. Um, and nobody was actually rebuilding my ecosystem. Two things were happening. One was I was in fight or flight, so we didn't have a shot in the dark to fully do this. And I now know with SIBO, SIFO, any kind of overgrowth, it's not always about killing it. So let's just talk about candida. I just had a woman come to me who's had like 20-year issue with candida. And people just throw aggressive supplements at it, but nobody's actually rebuilding her ecosystem. So part of it maybe you need to knock it down and then you need to start rebuilding. It's like a rainforest. You
Yeah.
need to build a robust rainforest um, of healthy microbes and fungus that can actually, and yeast that will help push it out. And sometimes we need to knock it down a little bit. So for me at the end, so I had reoccurrent SIBO for 8 years. At the end, how I got rid of it was through limbic work and by rebuilding my ecosystem. It wasn't even with herbals. And then actually, after I recovered, about 4 years later, I had major surgery and I got an infection. So antibiotics are not something I want to take ever, but I got a really bad infection and I had to take an antibiotic and that didn't work. And so I had to take two high dose antibiotics. And the day I started the second one, my belly blew up and I was like, oh boy, here we go. SIBO. And so SIBO came back. And that time I literally just did carnivore for 21 days. Now it wasn't there for that long to take hold, but I didn't even have to throw any herbs at it. Um, I just rebuilt naturally starved it off with carnivore. So, just by even saying stuff like that, there are so many nuances and ways to get somewhere that a lot of times people think I've tried everything and nothing worked. That person, no, there is 100% something that's going to work. There's a huge possibility it's actually something that you've tried before, but they just freaked out in their limbic system. Like most of the things that ended up working for me in the end were things I had tried before and had very wild reactions to, but I just had somebody be able to go slower. I worked on my limbic system, and I did it for a long period of time.
Mhm.
So we don't recover overnight, and a lot of times people have like like a little flare. It's gonna happen, and they're like, "That didn't work," and so then they stop whatever they're doing and jump ship, and then they run off to the next person, and that's another great way to not make it.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
practitioner hub.
I want to ask some more questions about limbic system practices, right? Because you were talking about there's so many things throughout the day to reinforce the new neural pathway. And some of those things are like just mixing things up, right? I've heard like, journaling with your left hand or eating with your left hand or your non-dominant hand. You can, pick up some different or, rearrange the furniture, some of these things, gratitude journaling, and like daily affirmations. Music that you're listening to is a big impact too. Like with activation, we want to avoid a lot of the overstimulating things in our day to day. But what did I miss? Any other things you want to share there that would be
Yeah,
helpful? And then how do you keep it from being overwhelming for people? Because I think a lot of people will see this whole list of limbic exercises that they need to do. And then they're like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I can't do all of this at once. So what do you do for those people?
Yeah, great question. So in the beginning, we always have people like if you have pictures on your wall to move them around. I always wore black, so I started wearing color. I had bought this pair of, oh, my shoes were always black. I bought this pair of white shoes when I was healing at the end. And every time I stepped into them, I was like, I'm stepping into my new life. I'm stepping into my new life. So I like wired this experience in. So every time I put on the shoes, I was like, oh, and I started parting my hair in a different way. Um, I tried to change a lot up because my limbic system had gotten really rigid. It wanted everything a certain way. And so when we start inviting newness into our brain starts to become plastic. It also helps it get it out of some of the rigidity. And so moving things around the house is really important and good. Um, let's see.
I
There's
feel like
different.
that's another, I feel like that's a reason why when people travel, they feel better while they're traveling and they're not as symptomatic sometimes. But not for everybody, but some people. But yeah.
Yes. So a lot of people travel and their symptoms go down. One, you might have mold in your house. Like there might be something
Mhm.
going on in your home that whatever. But if you just went on a trip to Hawaii with your family, or you go on a trip and you're like, oh, I felt better, my digestion was a little bit better. Um, when you have a hardware problem, right? So let's say my arm is broken, snap the bone in half. Um, I live in Austin, Texas, so my level of pain is a 9. I broke that today. If I got on an airplane and I ended up in Hawaii tonight, my arm would still be in a level 9 pain because I have a hardware problem. That bone broke and it literally needs fixing. A software problem is coming from our brain. So if you're at home and in your routine and your routine stresses you out and you have all these triggers, and then you go on a trip and you were like, oh my gosh, I feel like my symptoms were like a little bit better. You know, limbic impairment is affecting you on some level because moving location cannot change a hardware problem. It cannot make my arm any less broken. Um, but if your brain is contributing to it, your symptoms will go down. Another one of your questions is you'll hear a lot of the practices that happen, and then there's a lot of things like yoga that happens, vagal toning, breathing exercises. Um, how does somebody not get overwhelmed? Well, I practice a lot different today than I did in the beginning, and we start with what feels good. I start with the one thing that's going to move the needle the most, and it's, hey, which of these practices feels really good to you today? And then you're going to do that. Because if you worked with a practitioner that was like, you have to do this, this, and this at this minute and this thing, and or it's never going to work, that's a great way to scare the bejesus out of your system and and to really stress you out. So it does not have to happen in a stressful way. Um, we really invite bringing joy and fun back into lives. I work with women and couples and men. After some recovery starts happening, we work on reintegrating sexuality back into their life. If chronic illness often can come in between a marriage or partnership, or we've kind of shut down those parts of ourselves because we've been so worried about healing. So bringing back those parts of ourselves is really fun. Um, yeah, I think I answered.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
I
so
know. Here's
helpful.
one other thing that was so cool that I did during my recovery. So I had all of these, my brain had all these stories about supplements. And it's like, this is for this, and this is for this, and I react to this, and I can only have this much of this. So I took Post-it notes and I put Post-it notes over all of my supplements, and I called one of them Habit Former because I was working on building habits. And I called one of them Love Potion, and it said, every time you take this, you feel more love. And every time you take this, you're better at your habits. And so I relabeled all of my supplements to something positive because I was getting rid of the label of chronic illness and I was stepping into. I also put Post-it notes up all over my home of um, others recover, so can I. And I would see that message, others recover, so can I. Um,
Mhm.
action leads to mood. No, action leads to mood. So I had to, so in the beginning, here's another thing. Oh, here's something super important. I had to literally fake it until I made it. So I was on many days experiencing really heavy depression. I could feel the sadness in my arms. Um, I stopped therapy at the time, so they told me I couldn't cry. And I was like, wait, no, like I've just figured out through this trauma release thing, like this is what I do. I release my emotions. And they were like, you're strengthening your neural networks around these issues. And I was really scared to stop that practice. And the guy that I was working with on trauma stuff said, hey, why don't you just do this for 6 months? And then when you're done, come back and we'll finish the trauma work. The amazing thing is I never had to go back. I never had to go back. So what I now know was trauma in my life was my inability to handle it because of limbic system impairment. Let me explain. If there's a home that catches on fire, and there's two people upstairs and they get locked in the door and they're almost not going to make it out and they're wrestling and somebody, like they're really scared and then they finally bust out the door and they both run out the house and they make it out. But really they could have died. One of them ends up with complex PTSD and the other one's okay. What happened? It's the person who had limbic system impairment. Their brain is stuck in a state of fight or flight, so they can't process that. So they're they are literally having PTSD response from the same situation. So I had a PTSD response, a lot of trauma around my mother. I couldn't be in the same room as her. I had a lot of childhood trauma. I just sort of figured that would be my whole life. What trauma work felt like for me, what therapy and trauma work felt like for me was this never-ending onion of like another layer and another layer. And I would go to trauma workshops and therapy workshops and this course and I think I felt better because I was taking action, but I was like never thriving. Like I was just like still stuck. I was stuck. Getting my brain out of fight or flight actually healed me of the stuff. And the woman, my mother, whom I could not be in the same room with, literally could not be in the same room with, I just got to take her to Iceland so that she could experience her last thing on her bucket list was to see the Northern Lights. And so I got to take my mama to see the Northern Lights. And when we saw them when we were standing there, I started crying like I am now. And all I thought was, oh man, she fought for me. Like she knew I would get out of this. And so part of my story had been addiction and eating disorder and chronic illness. And then I had this trauma response with this woman who I couldn't be around, who now I get to share the most beautiful years of her life with her. And that's single-handedly from limbic work, not from any of the trauma work that I did. And so that when I say everything about my life got better, um, there's not a single piece of the constitution of who I am that was not positively impacted by my limbic work. I mean, if I could just scream from the rooftops that people need this, I know it's because everything will get better, right? That's not a magic pill, but I know that it will move the needle. There's 100% chance it will move the needle. How far? We don't know, but the moon, it's possible.
Yeah. There's no better time than now to start it too. It's like you said, like there's no harm in trying it. And I mean, we need it more than ever at this time with our nervous system's response to just modern life. And we can't always control the stresses that we get in life, right? And so we don't need to fear it though, because there's all these studies on how negative the impact of stress is on our life, right? But I've heard that so many times. It's like, what do you do then? Well, we can build our resiliency to it. And this is a huge way too. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Courtney, I'm so grateful that we had this time to have this conversation and I it's just so amazing. I can see the passion you have that comes out of that lived experience of all of these different areas of your life, your physical health, your relationships completely having been altered from engaging in this limbic work process, along with, I know, the dietary piece was big too. So it's so cool. I love the work you do, I love the work Natalie does. Like, you two are making such a big difference in the world to support people and meet them where they're at. I mean, that's a big takeaway I've had as I've heard both of you speaking, is the importance of really looking at where someone is, meeting them there, and then you know, applying interventions accordingly. Like, I think a part of me was like, okay, I want you two to nail down what are these common factors, what are these foods, and you two mentioned maybe a little bit there, but you kept going back onto that bio individuality because it really just looks so different on a case by case basis. So in wrapping up here, Courtney, uh, curious if you could just share with the listeners maybe good resources if people are interested in learning more about your work. Where's a good place to direct folks?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, which is finalkeywellness.com. The name of my company is Final Key because I'm not, myself or any of my practitioners are not your final key. You are. And what we do is give you the tools to get your body there, which is really empowering. So that or the social media is at Final Key Wellness. There's a dot in between each of those. And or you can email me at courtney@finalkeywellness.com. And something that I want to take, whether somebody feels like I would be a fit to work with or not, what I want them to hear is like, please let this seed sit in your soul, in that I don't care how bad it's been. I don't care how many people you've seen, how many protocols you've tried. I don't care what person told you that this is going to be permanent and forever. That does not mean that's true. I have seen miracles happen over and over and over again, and others recover. So can you. And if I would have stopped looking, I would have been stuck too. And so, if anything resonates with you somewhere, allow your heart to take you towards that person, because another level of health is always possible. It really is. Don't stop. Really don't stop. That's what I just want to tell everybody, because I think sometimes we get so hopeless after hearing, like trying all of the routes, and hope it matters and it's possible, and a good life is possible.
Wow, you're the best guest, Courtney. You just answered the question that I was going to ask. What's a message you want to leave people with today? And what a great message. My grandma used to always tell me, just never give up, just keep taking steps. And like, you're totally right. I think in you sharing today, it's clear. If you keep, no matter how intense the depression is, the mental health issues you're facing, relational issues, physical issues, I mean, just keep taking steps,
Mhm.
you can
Yeah,
heal.
and I want to thank both of you guys for all the work that you're doing in the world. It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Well, thanks
Courtney.
again, Courtney.